My maiden name is Daisy Simpson. I was born in Ashland City, Tennessee, February the 9th, 1930. It was still going on when I started school. And I started school when I was 5. Dad raised tobacco, corn, wheat. They took the wheat and the corn to the mill, had it made into flour and meal. And about the only thing we ever had to buy was sugar and coffee. We raised hogs. I had all kinds of meat all winter long. Mama raised chickens. We had our own eggs. We had cows that we milked and had our milk and butter. And we traded at this one little general store in the community. And he carried everything that you need. And they bought material and made our clothes. They bought overalls for my brother and shoes. And they bought kerosene for the lamps. We didn't have electricity till I was 12 years old. And we had no running water. And we were just self-sufficient. And Mama also canned everything, you know, that grew in the garden and everything. And we never did go hungry, that's for sure. We were visiting relatives in Nashville, over on North 1st Street. And some kind of alarm went off uptown and everybody was trying to figure out what was happening. And I think it was my uncle went down to a little restaurant right below the house, and they had a radio on, and they said Pearl Harbor's been bombed. And there was people crying and going on, and all the young men around there were going down the street to enlist in the Army. I remember that so well. Everybody that was 18 had to register for the draft. And then, you know, they drafted them as they pulled up their number. And we were over there playing at my aunt's house. I remember it just like it was yesterday. Well, the first thing that really changed was the rationing. You got stamps to buy gas. You got stamps to buy your shoes. You got stamps to buy your sugar. And the way they did that, they allotted you so much for each person in your family. You could not trade stamps, you could not sell them. Of course they did, counterfeit, a lot of people did. But you got one pair of shoes a year. And if you were farming, they had A, B, C, and D stamps for gas. And the ones that were farming got the most. That was the A stamp. And then like you had to go to Nashville to work, you got a B stamp. People just had their car and truck for recreation. They got C's and D's. They didn't get much. But just about everything was rationed. You couldn't get tires or inner tubes. And Daddy would patch them and patch them and patch them. And when you started out on a trip, you knew you better take the patching kit with you, because it was years. Well, they had cards to get tires too. I've forgotten that. But Daddy just had a farm truck, so he got a good, you know, he could get more than a lot of people. And you could just pleasure car or something. I remember my grandmother Roosevelt started something like called WWII. They leased a big field right across the street road, just gravel roads then, from my grandmother's house, and they planted it all in beans. And these people would come out there and work all day long in those bean fields, chopping out, and they'd come back and pick the beans. And my grandmother was a very, very generous lady. I mean, she wouldn't let anybody go without. And she'd get in there and make a bunch of bread and stuff, and up in the evening she'd call them and tell them to come over to her yard, and they'd sit down under the tree, and she'd get them a glass of ice water and this homemade bread. She made it with whole wheat flour. That's another thing, you couldn't get white flour. You had they didn't, refine it. And it was just luck if you got a sack of sugar. But we made it fine. We didn't have nothing before, and we didn't have nothing after, so just everybody was in the same boat back then. And I know we went to church at a place about a mile and a half from home, and we walked. Daddy never would go, Mama did, and she'd take us kids. And we'd walk a gravel road out to New Hope Church. And we took our shoes off. Well, we didn't even put them on. And we walked till we got inside of the church. And then we sat down on a rock or something, put our shoes and socks on. We had to save our shoes because you wouldn't get any more. You just got one pair a year. And that's why you had to save just everything that you could, And Daddy said, oh, we haven't got it too bad. Said, you should have been around World War I. So he was in that, he was in France, and he said that was really bad. And I know that there was a lot of politicking. My daddy was caught up in that, working for this one and that one. And that Roosevelt got elected the 4th term. He was the only one that ever did. And my daddy got out and worked to get people to vote for him. And you had to pay poll tax. You had to pay $2 to vote. And the campaign manager would give Daddy a bunch of money. And he'd go around to these people, most of them illiterate, and the black people. And he'd give them $2 to go vote for the Roosevelt. He'd pay their poll taxes, and then he'd give them an extra $1. And so they bought votes back then just like they do now. Yes, we had a flagpole in front of the school, and we had a scrap iron drive, and I never will forget it. People came down the highway rolling big old metal wheels and plows and everything, and we had it all around the flagpole in the front of the school. There's no telling how much we had there. And we had, for children, they had little books. I'm trying to think what they were called. But you put dimes in little slots, and when you got $18.75, you could buy a $25 war bond. And in 10 years, you could get $25 for it. But I never did get a book full. We didn't have any extra dimes. Everybody did. Everybody had to. Well, you raised what you ate, and they had places in the county. It was in a building, some empty building, and they brought these big commercial canners in, and you could pick your corn, tomatoes, beans, whatever you had to can, and you could go there. And the people in the community all pitched in, like we took some, everybody would come help us. And they canned them in tin cans in this big, it was like a cylinder, round. And you could put 100 cans in there at one time. And everybody did it, and they had all the canned stuff they needed. And if our family went, 8 or 10 more families come and help, shuck corn or whatever we're doing. But my brother had to go. See, my daddy was in World War I. My brother went in 43, and he was sent to Italy. And everybody around there had somebody nearly that was in the army. And if they were just in the army, you got a blue flag about this big a square with a white star to hang in your window. Okay, if the one overseas, they got a red star. Now wait a minute. Oh yeah. If they got killed, it's gold star. There's signs about the gold stars in the window. And there were several young boys right there and then within walking distance of our house that got killed. But my brother made it back home. And his cousin was over there, and just about everybody around there. We had some cousins, were twin boys. Their name was Otto and Hugo Perry. And they had to go, and both of them got killed. They were second cousins to us. We didn't know them we weren't very close, but we knew who they were and visited sometimes. But both of them got killed at just 18 years old. I remember they came out with artificial sweeteners for the first time, and they thought it was great. They'd go to the store and buy saccharin and sweeten our tea and coffee with it because you'd run out of sugar. And I remember that my cousin was in the Air Force, and he came home and he had something about the size of a pencil. And of course we were a lot younger than him. I was probably 13. And he said, "Look what I've got." And he gave it to us. We passed it around, twisted and everything. And it was plastic. That was the first plastic that we ever saw. And he had brought it from the Army with him. And he said, one day they're going to be making everything out of plastic. But he brought that in. That was just a curiosity. We even took it down next door and showed it to them. I was in my front yard, right down here where the Southern Baptist Church is in Pleasant View. And the Methodist Church is on the other side of the street. And they began ringing the bells up there. And we were all out in the yard, and everybody was running out in the yard just yelling, "The war's over, the war's over." And that's all I remember about that. I remember everybody was very happy. And my brother came home that fall. He got out. He got home and saw his baby for the first time. His wife was expecting a baby when he had go overseas, and when he come home, the little boy was scared of him and he cried. And we told him to go shave his beard off, and then the little boy, you know, he was just happy to be with him. After the war, I was still in high school, and I started the 12th grade, and met him, and we got married. He said I could go back to school, and the rules then was a married person couldn't go to school. So I finally got my GED after I had children. So I like to went back, you know, and graduated. I still keep in touch with some of them. There's not too many left. There was only 38 graduated that year, because we were in a small school over at Ashland. I believe I was still in school, high school, when he died, because they rung the bell, you know, and that meant everybody come to the auditorium, and they made the announcement. And one girl jumped up, she said, "Yay!" She was a Republican. She said, "Now my daddy will get to come home." And the teachers, they jumped all over her for doing that. They said, "It don't matter who it was that died, you never rejoice." But she did. She jumped up and slapped him hand and said, "Yay, Daddy'll be home."